Hello. I met Emily at a mutual friend's birthday party when I was 24. It was one of those crowded apartment gatherings where music thumped against the walls and people squeezed past each other in the narrow hallways. I wasn't in the mood to be there, but I had promised my friend I'd show up. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to belong in that setting effortlessly. She was standing by the kitchen counter, laughing as she struggled to open a bottle of wine. Her dark brown hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and there was something about the way she crinkled her nose when she laughed that caught my attention. "Need some help?" I asked. She smirked and handed me the bottle. "Be my guest." The cork came off easily, and she raised an eyebrow. "Lucky break," she teased before pouring 2 glasses and handing me one. We spent most of the night in a corner of the apartment, talking about everything: movies, travel, our least favorite subjects in school. She had a way of making even the most ordinary things sound interesting. By the time I left, I had her number saved in my phone under Emily, wine opener. The next morning, she texted me first. From that point on, we were inseparable. Our relationship moved naturally, like we were always meant to find each other. Dates turned into weekends together, weekends turned into shared grocery lists, and spare toothbrushes at each other's places. 3 years later, I proposed in the quiet comfort of our apartment, slipping a ring into the pages of her book, knowing she'd find it when she least expected it. She did, and the way her eyes lit up at the sight of it is something I'll never forget. We had a small wedding, just family and close friends, nothing extravagant. It was perfect in its simplicity. For our honeymoon, we rented a cabin by a quiet lake, where we spent the days hiking and the nights sitting on the porch, talking about the life we wanted to build. And that's exactly what we did. We bought a house a year later, a modest but cozy place in a neighborhood where kids rode their bikes down the street, and the neighbors waved from their porches. I worked in finance, long hours but good pay. Emily was a freelance graphic designer, working from home most days, meeting clients in coffee shops or shared workspaces when needed. Life felt good. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. The first few years of our marriage felt like something out of a movie. Not the dramatic, passionate kind with grand gestures and impossible stakes, but the quiet, comforting kind. The kind where 2 people find happiness in the little things. Our home was a modest 2-bedroom house with a small backyard and a porch just big enough for a couple of chairs. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and we loved it. On weekends, Emily and I would tackle little home improvement projects, painting rooms, rearranging furniture, picking out plants that we inevitably forgot to water. She had an eye for design, always knowing exactly how to make a space feel warm and lived in. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of coffee brewing. Emily wasn't a morning person, not in the slightest, but she always made sure I had a cup before I left for work. I'd find her sitting at the kitchen table in her oversized sweater, hair a mess, sipping from her own mug with one eye barely open. "Try to survive without me," she'd mumble as I kissed her on the forehead before heading out. She worked from home most days, curled up on the couch with her laptop, sketching designs, or working on digital illustrations for clients. Sometimes, she'd send me pictures of her progress throughout the day, mock-ups of logos, branding concepts, the occasional doodle of our dog, Max, wearing glasses. Max was our first baby, a scrappy little mutt we adopted from a shelter a year into our marriage. He had big, floppy ears and a habit of stealing socks from the laundry basket. Emily adored him, and he followed her everywhere, curling up beside her while she worked. Evenings were our time. No matter how busy we got, we always made sure to have dinner together. Some nights, we cooked elaborate meals, experimenting with new recipes. Other nights, we ordered takeout and ate on the couch while binge-watching whatever show we were into at the time. It didn't matter what we were doing. What mattered was that we were together. On weekends, we explored the city, trying out new restaurants, wandering through bookstores, or taking long drives with no particular destination. Emily had this habit of rolling down the window and letting the wind whip through her hair, eyes closed, a small smile on her lips. "This," she'd say, "is what happiness feels like." Looking back, those moments seem almost too perfect. At the time, I never questioned it. We were happy, truly happy, or at least, I thought we were. Years passed, and our life settled into a rhythm that felt comfortable, like a well-worn sweater that fit just right. We weren't the same starry-eyed couple we had been when we first got married, But there was something even better in its place, a quiet understanding, a deep familiarity that made everything feel easy. We talked about kids now and then, but never with any urgency. There was always time, we thought. We enjoyed the freedom of being just the two of us, of being able to go on spontaneous weekend trips or stay out late without worrying about anything but Max needing to be let out. We told ourselves that one day, we'd start a family, but for now, we were content. Our house had become more than just a place we lived. It was a reflection of us. Emily had decorated every room with a mix of modern and vintage pieces, always with an eye for detail. She had a talent for making things beautiful, for turning the ordinary into something special. The walls were covered in framed artwork, some from her favorite artists, some her own. In the kitchen, she had strung up fairy lights that cast a warm glow over our late-night conversations. Our careers kept us busy, but we always made time for each other. I worked long hours in finance, and she continued her freelance work, taking on bigger and more exciting projects. Sometimes, she'd have to meet with clients in the evenings, but she always made sure to text me when she was on her way home. "Don't fall asleep without me," she'd say, and most nights, I didn't. Fridays were always reserved for us. It had started as a simple tradition, movie night with takeout, but over time, it became sacred. No matter what else was going on, Friday nights were ours. We'd pick a movie, curl up on the couch with Max at our feet, and let the week melt away. Emily had this way of making even the most mundane things feel special. Grocery shopping turned into a mini adventure, with her sneaking snacks into the cart when she thought I wasn't looking. Cleaning days turned into dance parties, with music blasting as we tackled the mess together. She had a lightness to her, a way of making life feel effortless, and I loved her for it. Looking back, I wonder if I should have paid more attention, if I should have noticed the tiny shifts, the little changes in our routine. But at the time, I had no reason to question anything. Our life was good. We were happy. Or at least, that's what I believed. Looking back, I wonder when it really started. Was there a single moment, a defining event that should have tipped me off? Or was it a slow unraveling, a series of tiny shifts that only made sense in hindsight? At first, it was nothing. Little things. Emily started spending more time out of the house, meeting clients more frequently. That wasn't unusual. Her work had always required the occasional in-person meeting, but the frequency picked up. She started dressing up more when she went out, putting in extra effort with her hair and makeup. I joked about it once, teasing her about trying to impress her clients. She just laughed and said, "It's called professionalism, babe." It was a good enough answer. It made sense. But then there were the late nights. Emily had never been much of a night owl, yet suddenly, she was coming home later and later. "The project's on a tight deadline," she'd say. The client kept me longer than expected. She always had a reason, always a perfect excuse. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Then there was her phone. She had never been secretive about it before. We were the kind of couple who didn't think twice about using each other's phones to check a text or look something up. But now, she kept it close, always face down on the table, always silencing notifications when I was nearby. One night, while she was in the shower, I picked it up out of habit, intending to check the time. The screen lit up with a message. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." My stomach dropped. Before I could process it, the message disappeared, vanished from the screen as if it had never been there. Emily must have set up her phone to delete messages automatically. I stood there, staring at the blank screen, my mind racing. Who was it from? Was it innocent? A joke from a friend? My gut told me otherwise. I placed the phone back exactly as it was and sat on the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. When Emily came out of the shower, she was humming to herself, towel drying her hair, completely unaware that my world had just tilted on its axis. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't confront her. Maybe I should have. But something inside me hesitated. I needed to be sure. Once suspicion takes root, it's impossible to unsee the things you used to overlook. Suddenly, every late night, every unexplained absence, every glance at her phone felt like a clue. I wanted to believe I was overthinking, that my mind was twisting harmless details into something sinister. But deep down, I knew better. Emily had changed. It wasn't just the late nights or the phone habits, it was the way she was around me. The way she smiled at me felt different, like it didn't quite reach her eyes. When I'd kiss her, she'd hesitate for half a second too long before kissing me back. When we sat on the couch together, she kept a little more distance between us than before. And then there were the lies, small ones at first, ones that were easy to dismiss. One evening, she told me she was meeting an old friend for dinner, someone I had never met. I didn't think much of it until later that night, when I casually asked how it went. She hesitated before answering, as if she had to remind herself of the details. It was nice, she said. We just caught up over a few drinks. I asked where they went. She named a restaurant across town. Later, out of curiosity, I checked our credit card statement online. There was no charge from that restaurant. Instead, there was a transaction from a small cocktail lounge in a different part of the city, one I knew she had never mentioned before. I told myself it could have been a mistake. Maybe her friend had paid, and they went somewhere else afterward. But the doubt was there now, gnawing at the edges of my mind. A few days later, I noticed another strange thing. Emily had started taking extra care with her appearance, not just for work, but even on random afternoons when she had no plans. She bought new lingerie, expensive perfume, heels she had never worn around me. You're really stepping up your style, I joked one evening as she adjusted her dress in the mirror. She smiled, but it felt off. Forced. Just trying to feel good about myself, she said, grabbing her purse. I'll be back soon. I nodded and watched her walk out the door, my gut twisting into knots. Something was wrong. I wasn't sure what I would do about it yet, but one thing was clear, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The feeling of unease had settled into my bones. It was no longer just a passing worry or an overactive imagination. It was something real, something I couldn't shake. But even then, I kept telling myself I needed more proof, something undeniable. Emily's behavior continued to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. She was more distant, more careful with her phone, more defensive when I asked simple questions. The nights out became more frequent, and the excuses felt thinner. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just reading too much into things. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, watching a show we had been following for months. Normally, Emily would curl up next to me, her legs tucked under a blanket, casually resting her hand on my leg. But tonight, she sat at the far end, scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention. Everything okay? I asked. She looked up, startled. Yeah, why? I shrugged. I don't know. You've just been distracted lately. She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Work's been stressful. That's all. I nodded, but the explanation didn't sit right. The next day, I decided to do something I had never done before. I checked our shared car's mileage. Emily had taken it out the night before for one of her supposed late meetings, and I wanted to see if the numbers added up. They didn't. She had driven almost twice the distance it would take to get to the client's office and back. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Maybe she had run some errands, maybe she had taken a different route home, but why wouldn't she mention it? Why wouldn't she just say something? That night, as she was getting ready to leave again, I asked her where she was going. Meeting up with Rachel, she said casually, referring to one of her old friends. Haven't seen her in forever. I forced a smile. Tell her I say hi. She smiled back, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and dialed Rachel's number. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. Maybe I wanted to catch Emily in a lie, or maybe I just needed reassurance. Rachel picked up after a few rings. Hey, it's me, I said. Sorry for the random call, but are you meeting up with Emily tonight? There was a brief pause before Rachel answered. What? No, I haven't talked to Emily in weeks. The floor felt like it dropped out from under me. I managed to mutter something about a misunderstanding before hanging up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Emily had lied to me. I didn't know where she was going or who she was with. But I knew one thing for certain, something was very, very wrong. I wanted to believe I was wrong. That maybe I had been overthinking everything, seeing ghosts where there were none. But the doubt was there, growing like a tumor, and I knew I needed something undeniable before I confronted her. That Friday, Emily surprised me by suggesting we go out for dinner. It had been a while since we'd had a proper date night, and for a moment, I let myself believe this was her way of making things right. She wore a deep red dress, the kind she knew I loved. Her makeup was subtle but perfect, her hairstyle just enough to make it look like she hadn't tried too hard. She looked beautiful, just like she always had. And for a little while, things almost felt normal again. We ate at a quiet little restaurant we used to go to all the time when we first got married. We laughed, we talked, we reminisced. I told myself that whatever doubts I had, I needed to push them aside. Maybe she had been distant because of stress. Maybe everything I thought I had seen was just in my head. But then, as we were finishing dessert, she checked her phone and sighed. I completely forgot, she said, shaking her head. Rachel asked me to meet her for drinks tonight. She just texted me to remind me. Rachel. The same Rachel who, just days ago, had told me she hadn't spoken to Emily in weeks. I felt my stomach drop, but I forced myself to stay calm. Oh, I said, keeping my voice casual. I thought tonight was just about us. She gave me a small smile and reached across the table, squeezing my hand. It was. And it's been amazing. But I promised her, and I don't want to bail last minute. I nodded, pretending to understand. Pretending to believe her. We drove home together, and as soon as we pulled into the driveway, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading to her car. I won't be too late, she said, smiling as she got in. Love you. I watched as she drove away, my hands clenched into fists. Not even 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was my friend, Mark. I answered, still staring at the road where Emily had disappeared. Hey, man, he said, his voice hesitant. Where's Emily right now? I frowned. She just left to meet Rachel. There was silence on the other end. Dude, Mark finally said. I'm looking at her right now. She's at the bar across from my place. And she's not with Rachel. A chill ran through me. Who is she with? Mark hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Some guy. They're sitting in a booth near the window. And shit, man, they're all over each other. The blood in my veins turned ice cold. You're sure it's her? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yeah, no doubt. I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might break. My chest felt like it was caving in, a sharp, unbearable pressure pressing against my ribs. This was it. No more doubts. No more excuses. Emily was cheating on me. And now, I had proof. I didn't sleep that night. After Mark's call, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the floor, my hands clenched into fists. I felt everything all at once. Rage, humiliation, betrayal. The image of Emily sitting in that booth with another man, touching him the way she used to touch me, laughing at his jokes, whispering in his ear, it burned into my mind like a brand. I wanted to storm into that bar, grab her by the wrist, and demand an explanation. I wanted to drag that bastard outside and make him regret ever laying a hand on my wife. But I didn't. Because Emily wasn't my wife anymore, not really. She had made the choice the second she let another man into her life. No, I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to let her cry and make excuses. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into believing I was overreacting. I was going to destroy her. The next morning, I started making calls. First, to a locksmith. By the end of the day, every lock in the house would be changed. Then, to a moving company. I told them I needed someone available on short notice. How soon? The guy asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. And I need everything packed. Emily had no idea that the night she spent with her lover would be the last time she walked into this house as my wife. After that, I went to work gathering every piece of her existence and getting it the hell out of my life. I pulled her clothes from the closet, boxed up her shoes, her jewelry, her personal items. Every framed photo of us, every love note she had ever written me, I threw them all into a trash bag. Her makeup, her shampoo, her favorite coffee mug, I didn't care. It all had to go. I even grabbed the stupid little stuffed bear I had won for her at a carnival years ago, the one she had kept on her nightstand all this time. I stared at it for a moment before tossing it into the bag. She didn't deserve to keep a single reminder of the life she had thrown away. By the time I was finished, her belongings were packed and stacked by the front door. Tomorrow, when she came home, she wouldn't be walking into our home. She'd be walking into the ruins of the life she had burned to the ground. And I would be standing there, waiting to watch it all fall apart. The morning came, and with it, the finality of what I was about to do. I woke up feeling strangely calm, as if all the rage and heartbreak had settled into something colder, something sharper. Today was the day I erased Emily from my life. The movers arrived right on time. I didn't bother explaining much, just pointed to the pile of boxes and told them everything by the door needed to go outside. They worked fast, carrying out every piece of her existence and leaving it on the front lawn. By noon, her things were stacked outside in neat, miserable little piles. Clothes, shoes, bags, personal items, everything she had brought into this house was now sitting under the sun for the world to see. I stood by the front door, waiting. She texted me around 1 o'clock. Emily, hey, just got done with lunch. On my way home. Want me to pick up anything? I stared at the message, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet, grim satisfaction. I didn't respond. 15 minutes later, I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. Then, silence. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the sight in front of her, her belongings spread out on the lawn, like discarded remnants of a life that no longer belonged to her. I stepped outside, leaning casually against the doorframe. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide with shock and panic. She scrambled out of the car, looking from me to the piles of her things. What is this?" she stammered. I folded my arms. "Your new home." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head. "You're not coming back in, Emily. It's over. You made your choice." She blinked rapidly, her hands trembling as she reached for me. Wait, just talk to me. What's going on?" I took a step back, out of her reach. "Oh, I think you already know." She opened her mouth, but before she could say another word, I pulled out my phone and hit play. Mark had recorded everything for me. Video proof of her and her lover sitting in that bar, whispering, touching, kissing. It played in crisp, painful clarity, the audio loud enough for her to hear every stolen moment. Her face crumpled. "Oh my God." "Yeah," I said, my voice hard. "Oh my God." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I can explain." "No, you can't." I cut her off. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie. You don't get to beg." Her breath hitched, and she looked around, as if expecting a way out. But there was none. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this." I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Oh, you mean don't kick you out like a worthless piece of trash? Kind of like how you treated our marriage." She let out a strangled sob, shaking her head. "It was a mistake. I love you." I scoffed. "Love? That's funny. You sure as hell didn't love me last night when you were with him." Her face twisted in anguish, but I didn't care. I nodded toward her things. "Take your stuff and go, Emily. You're not my problem anymore." She broke then, sobbing uncontrollably, dropping to her knees on the driveway like some kind of pathetic scene from a movie. I didn't stay to watch. I turned, stepped back inside, and slammed the door behind me. Emily was gone, and I was finally free. The moment the door slammed shut, I felt a weight lift off me, a weight I hadn't even realized I had been carrying for months. The house was quiet, empty in a way that should have felt lonely. But it didn't. It felt clean. It felt like mine again. Outside, I could still hear Emily sobbing. She wasn't leaving. Maybe she thought if she just cried hard enough, I'd open the door, let her in, let her explain. She didn't understand. There was nothing left to explain. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table, staring at the door. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't drowning in rage or heartbreak. I was calm. My phone buzzed. "Mark." I answered. "How'd it go?" he asked. I glanced out the window. Emily was still on her knees by her things, her shoulders shaking as she cried. It was pathetic. "She's still out there," I muttered. Mark let out a low whistle. "Damn. She really thought she could just cry her way out of it, huh? Looks like it. You gonna let her sit there all night?" "No," I said simply. "She'll leave when she realizes there's nothing left to save." And I meant it. I wasn't going to argue with her. I wasn't going to let her inside for a final conversation. I wasn't going to give her one last hug, one last kiss, one last anything. She had made her choice the night she met that man. I was just making mine now. After a while, the sobbing outside quieted. I didn't check to see if she was still there. I didn't care. Eventually, I heard a car door slam. An engine started. Tires screeched as she drove off. And just like that, Emily was gone. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes. It was over. Finally, truly over. But as I sat there, staring at the empty space where she had been, I couldn't help but wonder, what now? The house was silent. For the first time in years, it was completely mine. No lingering scent of Emily's perfume in the hallway. No faint sound of her humming from the other room. No trace of her presence left behind. Just quiet. I should have felt relief, and in some ways, I did. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken back my life, torn out the rot that had been festering beneath the surface. But as I sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the blank space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang, I felt something else too. Emptiness. Not because I missed her. No, that part of me had died the moment I saw the proof of her betrayal. It was something else. A hollow kind of grief, not for her, but for the life I thought we had. For the years I had given to someone who never truly valued them. For the love I had poured into a marriage that, in the end, had meant nothing to her. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. Those emotions had come and gone. All that was left was the quiet acceptance that this was my new reality. The next morning, I woke up early. It was strange not hearing Emily's slow, sleepy footsteps as she shuffled into the kitchen. Strange not smelling coffee brewing. Not having someone there to tell me to have a good day. But strange didn't mean bad. I got up, made my own damn coffee, and sat on the porch with Max at my feet. The world outside felt different, like I was seeing it through fresh eyes. The sky looked bluer, the air felt crisper. I had spent so much time drowning in doubt, in anger, in pain, but now, for the first time in a long time, I felt something else. Possibility. I had no idea what came next. There were still things to figure out. The legal side of the divorce, the awkward conversations with mutual friends, the inevitable moment when Emily would try to reach out again, begging for another chance. But none of that mattered today. Today I was free. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Mark. Me, drinks tonight? First round's on me. His reply came almost instantly. Mark, hell yeah. Thought you'd never ask. I smiled to myself, took a slow sip of coffee, and let the morning sun warm my face. I had lost a wife, but I had gained something far more valuable. Myself. Bye-bye.